Welcome back to Faith Formation at Home. This week, our gospel, we continue through the Gospel of Mark, and we have this kind of twofold story going on here. Jesus is predicting his death again, right? Remember, last week's gospel had that as well. It kind of sounds like maybe we're reading the same thing again. It's not. We're in this stretch of Mark's gospel where Jesus is trying to drive the point home to his disciples. Look, this is how this thing is going to end, but I'm going to rise from the dead. And the apostles were not getting it, as evidenced by the fact that they're walking along the road. Jesus just said he's going to suffer and die, and they're arguing about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Right? Parents, you can kind of feel the frustration here possibly, right? How many times do I have to tell this to you? How many ways can I say this and you're still not getting it, right? But this, I think, is why Jesus pulls this child out and says, the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is like a child. You need faith like a child, right? I don't think he means childish faith, right? Or he means childlike faith, right? He doesn't mean just believe blindly and don't ask any questions, because your kids don't do that. My kids don't do that. That's not what Jesus wants. He wants faith like a child. Kids ask questions, but they also often enough will accept answers. And sometimes we as adults don't accept the answers. We just keep asking the question to try to beat down the opponent, right? So he wants us to be childlike and accept an answer. I also think there's an interesting blessing here for us as parents, right? Jesus says at the end of this gospel, whoever receives one such child as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. You and I as parents, we have received children, right? We've received children into our homes, into our families. And if we do that in Jesus' name, we receive God into our houses. That's a pretty cool thing, that through our kids, through our family dynamics, we can encounter God within our homes. Our Bible story this week for our little ones from the Jesus Storybook Bible is The Terrible Lie. All right, so last week we saw God setting up his perfect creation and putting Adam and Eve in charge of the whole thing. And now this week the whole story goes off a cliff, right? They've got one simple rule. Don't eat from this one tree. Parents, you know how this goes, right? One clear rule. What are they going to do? They're going to break the rule. And that's what Adam and Eve do. They choose to let, what the Catechism says, they choose to let trust in their Creator die in their hearts. Because that's the big lie, right? Is that God's holding out on them. God is giving them this one rule because he doesn't want them to be happy. It's the biggest lie in the world, right? The whole reason that God made you and made me is so that we could be happy in this life and supremely happy forever with him in the next life in heaven, right? And so the biggest lie in the world is God's not on your side, and now that you've sinned, God doesn't love you anymore, right? Because pay attention to how the story ends. Don't be tricked when you get to this page here where it says the end is not the end, right? Turn the page because there's more there. God does not abandon them, right? He promises he's going to fix this. He's going to send a Redeemer someday, and we're going to spend kind of the rest of this Bible storybook, rest of this year, building up to the birth of that Redeemer at Christmas, Jesus Christ, and how he goes about redeeming us by taking on all of our sin and dysfunction and nailing it to the cross and then rising again. So our catechism questions for our older kids in elementary school and middle school focus on not just knowing that God exists, that's what we covered last week, but knowing something about who that God is and what he is about, right? What this being wants. So you can know that God exists just by thinking about it and looking at the world around you and realize that there is a creator. But there are certain things about people that you only know if they tell you them, if they reveal them to you, right? So you wouldn't know that my favorite color is blue unless I tell you that, right? Or unless you have seen my car and my guitar and other things that are blue in my life, right? There's certain things about a person you just don't know until they tell you. And the same thing is true about God. We can know that God exists by thinking about it and looking at the world around us. We can know some things about him by looking at the world around us. God seems to like cycles and patterns and order, right? Just look at nature. There's symmetry in nature that, you can split a leaf in half and this side looks like that side most times, right? Symmetry in nature. You can look at orbits of planets, or at the subatomic level, electrons going around a nucleus. God seems to have a thing for circles, right? Circles and ovals, right? He likes patterns and cycles. But there are certain other things about God that we would only know if God told us them. Like he's three persons and only one God, right? You can't figure that out by looking at trees and flowers or just thinking about it, right? Certain things that we only know about God because he tells us that, right? That God is loving and that he is forgiving, right? So God has told us all this sort of stuff. How does he tell us this stuff? We hear about this in the Bible over and over and over again, right? God speaks to us through his word. He tells us about this through his church, through the living tradition, through the church constantly reminding us these are the things that God has revealed us, and this is what it means in our own day. Right? And so these catechism questions kind of invite us to think a little bit deeper about how can we know that God exists and how can we respond in faith? Because faith is believing not only that God exists, but also believing everything he told us about himself and about us.